Jamie and I walked to Tasha. She stood by the fire, fists clenched, watching Rowan as he left. She seemed to consider following him, but remained still. "Wait, what happened to Spencer?" Jamie asked, her voice hushed. The tears started flowing. "I don't know," Tasha wailed. "He slept before me because he was feeling sick. I fell asleep right after. And then I woke up. He was gone, along with all of his stuff." "You don't think he left because he was feeling sick?" Jamie asked. "No. I would have heard him packing up, and he would have at least given me a goodbye if he wanted to leave." Tasha looked at us, gritting her teeth. "Someone took him, and I bet it was Rowan, that sleazy little fucker." "We'll find Spencer," I assured her. "He couldn't have gone far." Tasha nodded, wiping the tears from her eyes. "I'll check back down the trail we came from. Maybe you two can look around the camp and up the trail." "Sounds good. I'll get Grant awake so he can look too," I said. We split off, and I returned to the tent, where Grant had now sat up in his sleeping bag and was rubbing his eyes. "What's going on?" he asked. "Spencer went missing. We're trying to find him," I said. Grant seemed to think a bit before responding. "Ash, we should leave." "What? Why?" "The person who made it last to the campsite each day went missing the next morning," Grant said. "Trevor was the last one on the first day, and Spencer was the last one on the second." "So you think we're in some sick version of the Amazing Race?" "Something like that. Ash, it's the only thing we know. But if we get to the campsites first, we might be able to, and leave Tasha and Jamie behind so they can get kidnapped. Or worse," I snapped. "Ash, please," Grant begged. "Once we get out of the forest, or get cell service or something, we can call the park. But we need to survive until then. Please. I don't want to lose you too." There were footsteps from outside the tent. Did they manage to find Spencer already? I opened the flap and saw Tasha, but no Spencer. "You're back quickly," I said. "No luck." Tasha sucked in her breath. "The trail back. It's blocked." "Blocked? By what?" "One of those giant trees. It had fallen over the path. I couldn't find a way around." My heart leapt to my throat. "So that means..." Tasha nodded. "The only way we can go is forward." Jamie returned a little later, her search fruitless as well. Solemnly, we began to pack up in preparation for the day's hike. With only 4 of us remaining, and with Rowan long gone, our group suddenly felt tiny and exposed. This was perhaps in part due to our silence. We were aware that something was terribly wrong, and yet too afraid to talk about it, almost as if speaking would beckon the forest's rage. We quietly went through the motions of packing, a ritual written into our muscle memory. Grant finished packing first, and part of me wondered if he'd leave us behind. When Tasha spoke up. "You three go ahead. I'll stay behind and keep looking." she said. Are you sure, Tasha? You don't want one of us to hang back? I asked. Tasha shook her head. The only way we're going to get out of here is to finish the hike, and I don't want to hold anyone else behind. I'll catch up with y'all later. I looked over at Grant, and he met my gaze. At least it's not one of us, his eyes told me. I looked away. Jamie, Grant, and I started on the hike a few minutes later. Somehow the trail had grown even steeper, my legs aching with protest. We must have been thousands of feet up by then. Do you think Tash will go missing too? Jamie asked us. Her voice begged for reassurance, but we had none to give. I don't know, Grant said. But if the previous nights are anything to go off, then it's possible. Then shouldn't we go back and make sure she's okay? Jamie said. I don't think we can do anything. Spencer went missing while he was in a tent with another person. Grant sucked in his breath. I think all we can do is finish the hike and report the missing people. How many more days of hiking do we have left? 4, I think, Grant said. The implication of that number wasn't lost on me. We continued hiking, step by step, one foot in front of the other. The sounds of crunching dirt, heavy breathing, the occasional unscrewing of a bottle lid, they all began to blend together. The trail never turned, never changed in slope. It only continued forward and up until it disappeared between the surrounding trees. And the trees were all woven trees. No other plant species seemed to grow anymore. Not even undergrowth ferns or weeds. The trees extended as far as the eye could see, like stalagmites in a giant cave, or teeth in a giant mouth. The day was long, hot, and exhausting. We ran out of water partway through, since Rowan usually filled our bottles for us during meals. The lack of a breakfast that morning also ensured our energy quickly depleted. We ate all the remaining dried fruit and granola bars from our packs, but even that wasn't enough to stave off exhaustion. Finally, we reached the campsite, with Rowan standing over the fire, cooking like usual. "Welcome," Rowan said with a suspiciously normal voice. "Dinner will be ready soon. Feel free to unwind and stop being fake with us." Jamie interrupted. "We know what kind of game you're playing, and we know what you're doing with our friends." "Oh, do you now?" Rowan said, his expression unchanging. "If this is how you want to speak, I can always leave you behind to starve." Grant and I darted eyes, fear exchanging between our glances. No, we didn't mean it like that," Grant stammered. "Yeah, we appreciate you cooking for us," I said. Rowan gave us a knowing smile. "Thought so." He put on the pot lid. "Hope you 3 like couscous." We wolfed down the meal as Rowan watched, perhaps expecting us to comment on his cooking. Dinner was good like usual, although I couldn't help but feel that the meal served as meat hung from a pole, motivating us like we were greyhounds in a deadly dog race. We sat around the fire in silence. I heard something crunch behind me, soft, irregular footsteps came from the trail, like a drunk person had wandered into the forest. I turned and saw Tasha stumbling towards us, although she could have passed for a ghost. Bags hung from her eyes, her skin eerily pale, her lips thin and dry. "Tasha," Jamie said, standing up. Her expression quickly grew dark. "Did you?" Tasha looked at us with eyes that were 100 years old. "He's gone," she said, her voice rasping. Tasha's uncharacteristic pronouncement of defeat scared me more than anything from before then. "Do you want some water?" I asked. "You look exhausted." Tasha gave a slight nod, and I handed her my water bottle. "I'm going to turn in early tonight," she said, unscrewing the bottle. "I have a killer headache that's not going away." Jamie and I exchanged worried glances. "We should keep watch over her," she said to me, quiet enough that Rowan wouldn't hear. I nodded, then looked at Grant, beckoning him to come over. "Should we stay outside her tent or stay in with her?" I asked. Jamie looked over at Tasha, who was still gulping water. "I think we should stay in the tent and stay awake. If Spencer went missing without Tasha noticing, then who knows what happened to cause that?" The idea didn't excite Tasha, but she was too tired to protest. "Just don't stay up all night giggling or something," she told them after the tent was set up and she laid in her sleeping bag. "We'll just be sitting here to make sure everything's okay," Jamie assured her. Even though the tent was meant for multiple people, it was tough fitting the four of us in. Tasha's body took up half the floor space, while the rest of us sat pressed against each other. It was uncomfortable, sure, but fear of what would happen otherwise kept us going. We opened one of the windows towards Rowan's tent, so we could see if he came. We chatted to stave off the silence, but before long, Tasha fell asleep and we stopped. The entire world was dead around us. No crickets chirped. No leaves rustled in the wind. The only sound was Tasha's soft breathing. If I didn't know any better, I would have believed we were the only living creatures for miles. Time marched onward. The temperature dropped, making me wrap my arms around my legs. Fatigue crept in, but anxiety kept it at bay. I counted seconds to keep track of time, but fell off somewhere in the thousands. Hours passed, or it could have been 30 minutes. But the next thing I remember is Jamie nudging me. I can't hear her breathing anymore," she whispered. I shot down my spine. Jamie was right. Somewhere during the sluggish mud flow of time, Tasha's soft hum had stopped. I reached over and gently placed my hand on top of the sleeping bag. There was still something inside. "Tasha?" I said. "Tasha?" She didn't move. "Grant, you have your flashlight, right?" Jamie whispered. "Yeah." There was a click, and what I saw in the light will forever haunt me. Tasha was still in her sleeping bag, but her face and neck was covered with something. Sandy grey, furrowed tree bark seemed to have replaced her skin. removing all of her facial features, like a woodcarver's mannequin, like the deer, like the wood of the woven trees. I couldn't sleep all night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Tasha's blank, wooden face boring into my soul. What was once a bright, passionate young woman and a close friend had been reduced to tree bark. Knowing that Trevor and Spencer had likely met the same fate, I wanted to cry, but was too numb to feel. The full realization had yet to hit, but I could see it barreling towards me in slow motion. There's no way half of our group just died, right? My mind frantically searched for answers, an alternative explanation. But instead, all it came up with was the dead deer fused to the tree. The events immediately after we saw Tasha's body are a blur to me. Someone screamed. Maybe it was me. I think Jamie tried peeling the bark off to no avail. Then tried CPR, knowing she likely wouldn't help. We woke Rowan, but while doing so, Tasha's body disappeared. Rowan didn't even bother lying to us. He just returned to his tent. Jamie tried tackling him, but he easily tossed her aside. "You're the one I'm most looking forward to," he'd said to her before disappearing into the tent. I felt Grant nudge me. I opened my eyes, although I'm not sure if they were closed to begin with. It was still dark. "You awake, Ash?" came his voice. I made a noise that was something between a grunt and a gurgle. "We should go," he said. "Go where?" "To the next campsite," Grant said, rolling up his sleeping bag. "While it's still early." I rolled over and groaned, my unrested body complaining. But I followed suit, rolling up my sleeping pad, quickly changing my clothes, and putting on my hiking boots. In minutes, we had everything packed, and we were on the trail, illuminated using Grant's flashlight. It was then that I realized something was off. "We're leaving Jamie behind," I said. Grant sucked in his breath, as if bracing for my reaction. "Yes, just to make sure we're safe." "So we're leaving her to die?" "If it's not her, it'll be one of us," Grant said through gritted teeth. "Is that any better?" "No, but at least we could have tried to figure out how to keep us all alive." "Ash, we know the rules of this game now. There's nothing left to figure out." "You don't know that. The three of us could have come up with something, and now we're not going to try." "It doesn't matter now. I made sure she wouldn't catch up to us," Grant said. It was then that I noticed the faint but distinct smell of lighter fluid coming from his clothes. "Grant? What do you mean by that?" I asked, my stomach twisting. Even through the faint morning light, I could see Grant grimace. "All of her stuff," he began. "I took what I could and set the rest on fire, far away from the camp." I felt my legs collapse. My vision blurred. This was not the Grant I knew. He might have still been physically alive next to me, but the real Grant was dead like the others. You did what? Ash, please. Grant begged. This is for the two of us. We need to. Are you going to burn my stuff tomorrow, too? Are you going to leave me behind just so you can get one more day to live in this hell? Ash, Jamie's blood will be on your hands. I screamed. The dam broke, and tears poured down my cheeks. You fucking greedy excuse of a boyfriend. We were both silent as the weight of my words set in. Between my sobbing gasps for breath, I could hear Grant crying as well. My head pounded, maybe from dehydration, exhaustion, anger, or a mix of all three. Regret began to fill me, but I couldn't muster the courage to apologize. 3 days of hiking stress poured onto the trail in a muddy river. Now sobs echoed through the cold, silent, cursed forest that surrounded us. I plan to propose to you, Grant finally said, his voice strained. When we got to the top, on the 4th day of the hike. Today. I wanted that to make me happy, but it didn't. Even after everything that happened, I asked, if these truly are our final days, then I might have, yeah. I wiped the tears from my eyes. Are you still going to do it? A dumb question, really, but it was all I could think of to say. The faintest of smiles sneaked onto Grant's face. You wouldn't want a greedy excuse of a husband, would you? I didn't know how to respond. We sat there in silence, leftover tears pit-patting to the ground. The sky was slowly lighting up now, the horizon glowing a vibrant yellow in anticipation of the sun's entrance. I don't know what I'd do without you, Ashley, Grant said, his voice breaking again. I guess that's why I did that. To make sure that I have as much time with you as I can. His voice begged for a response, but I had none to give. I'm sorry. Running won't work, I said. Grant lowered his head. I know, but it was the only thing I could think of. There's 3 more nights, I said. Either we die doing what Rowan wants, or we die trying to escape. Now it was Grant who didn't know how to respond. The sun's rays began to caress us as we sat there in silent contemplation. I looked over at Grant, whose head remained lowered. How did we get to this point? I thought. How did this hike destroy us all, even those still alive? There were footsteps from the trail. I looked up and saw Jamie walking towards us, carrying only her tent bag. Y'all wouldn't happen to know where my stuff went, would you? She called. Grant began. Here, you can use my stuff, I said, slipping off my backpack. I probably won't need it soon anyways. Ash, please don't say that, Jamie said, closing the distance to us. I shrugged. I mean, what else is there to say? Actually, last night I got an idea, Jamie said, leaning in. I think Rowan is pretty clearly responsible for what's happening. I nodded. He made that clear last night. So, how hard would it be to kill him?
Hello, Sinister listeners. If you've enjoyed this story, then you'll find all the author's information in the description below. For more content, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe to succumb to the sinister.